Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Q&A, whether it's morning, afternoon, or night, wherever you are in the world. This joint Q&A from History of Art in Glasgow. And it's a kind of joint one between the MLitt in Art History, which I convene, and the MLitt in Technical Art History and Book and Paper Conservation, which my colleague here, Christina, will be talking to you about and convenes. So we'll just introduce ourselves first, maybe, and then I think we're going to do a quick, brief introduction as to what you might expect from the course when you, if you arrive, if you're an offer holder, or if you're thinking of still taking the course, maybe in September. And then we'll have a discussion. And luckily, we also have a student from the course here as well, Caitlin, who I'm delighted to say has agreed to join us too, and to talk about her experiences. So, Christina, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Hi, I'm Christina Young. I'm the convener for the Technical Art History MLitt, which is a one-year program, and I'll be convener for the two-year MPhil in Book and Paper Conservation. I'm also director of the Kelvin Centre, which those two programs fall under, and the Kelvin Centre falls under the bigger world of History of Art department.
Caitlin?
Hi, yeah, I'm Caitlin. So I study the art history MLitt, which I study part-time. So I'm just finishing up my first year of the course just now. And then I'll do another year and do my dissertation next year.
Thank you both. And I'm John, and I convene the MLitt in Art History. And I've done that for the last 3 or 4 years. And I teach in the art history department here, and my own kind of area of research is very much focused on 18th century art, with a particular interest in landscape and landscape aesthetics and ideas about that. So I think, Christina, would you like to talk us to us a little bit about what students might expect from the program?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So let's start with the MLitt. As I said, it's full-time for 1 year in technical art history. So that's a combination of art history, technical analysis, and contextual documentation. There's pretty much core courses. So unlike maybe with the MLitt in art history, where you have options, the technical art history effectively has 4 core courses, 2 per semester, plus the placement and a dissertation. And the period, which kind of typically the period that we look over, is kind of 17th century to the 21st. But this year, one of our students looked at an ostrakon, so an Egyptian brick from 1400 BC. So it's not just Western art. We branch out into other areas of art from all cultures, and apply the same methodology and show you how technical art history is relevant to other methodologies as well. So the program is pretty much full-time in the sense that you'll be in university, in Glasgow University, for most of the week. There are obviously periods where you'll have free time and also independent learning. And because we're collections based, you'll be based close to the Hunterian collections, where the Kelvin Centre is next to in Kelvin Hall, and also Hunterian Art Gallery in the university, and then other collections like National Galleries of Scotland, Glasgow museums. So that kind of, you're very much hands-on in the course in terms of the kind of practical elements of studio time, either looking at objects, discussing objects, doing technical analysis, or sometimes making replicas. And then there's kind of the more formal lectures that support that in the course. As well as in the summer, there's a study trip. And this year, our students just come back from London, and they've been to Glasgow, they've been to British Museum, met the conservators there, and looked at the technical analysis they're doing, Tate, British Library, and National Gallery of London. So that kind of contextualizes much of the learning they've been doing, seeing it in practice in the professional environment. And I think they've got a lot from that this year. We go between usually London, Munich, Madrid, and sometimes we go to Amsterdam. So it varies each year. So the placement's key, and that happens in the first semester. In the second. That's right, second semester after Christmas, and our students at the moment have been to places this year like National Galleries of Scotland, and to private collections as well. So it's quite varied work that they get involved in. And at the moment, our students aren't on the screen because they're often dissertation projects, some at Perth Museum and Art Gallery, and some further afield in Scotland. So I think that kind of gives you a sense of that programme. I just wonder whether it's best, John, maybe to talk about the MLitt, and then I'll come back to the MPhil in book and paper, because the MLitt kind of related to each other.
Sure. Well, as Christina said, the MLitt in art history is slightly different in that from that programme, in that it's much more sort of based around a mix of core or compulsory kind of topics and classes and elective choices. Now, I can tell you what the core courses are, because those kind of stay the same each year. The electives for this coming year are still slightly uncertain. I've got a good idea of what they are, but for various reasons, which I'll come to in a moment, they're still being settled. So what you have to do over the course is, in the first semester, you take a core module or compulsory module on research methods and skills, which is a kind of team talk course and introduces students to a variety of different kinds of ways of understanding and approaching the history of art. And that's a cross-program course as well. So it's not just for MLitt in art history students, it encompasses those, dress and textile histories as well, for instance, which our subject area also kind of offers. And then you'll also have to choose 2 elective courses, and that includes a new course that we're offering this coming year on the idea of art and place, which we're going to be encouraging all of our students to actually take, as we see it as a rather kind of formative course, in that it looks to understand art history as locatable. Can we kind of situate art? That is, what happens when we ask where, as much as there's more familiar questions about what and when and if, those kinds of questions. We want to think about the significance of when. Now, the point of that, in a way as well, is that we know that not all of our courses, we have a mix of experiences in the student body. That is, we have some students who have done art history at undergraduate, but we also have students who have studied in kind of cognate disciplines, so are newish to art history. So that course is purposefully designed really to also introduce the study of art history, and to think about different kinds of methodological issues and approaches in the study. The other thing it's meant to do is to very much introduce you to Glasgow, and to Glasgow as a city, and also as a city of culture. And it's rich in collections, as Christina has already kind of emphasised. In the second semester, there'll be the opportunity to take a work placement, which is another kind of elective course that tends to be very popular with our students. And we've had placements in various local galleries, as well as in the university zone, the National Gallery in Scotland, as Christina has, as well as various collections dotted around not only Glasgow, but also the wider area of Scotland. If you don't want to do that route, and not everyone does, there are also the option of doing kind of independent pieces of research, which is good in terms of, for instance, preparing you for your dissertation. And it's the dissertation which is, the other big compulsory element of the course. If you want to get a sense, though, of the kinds of courses that we offer, there are some listed on the website for the course, for the program rather. But then we can't get those fluctuate each year as to what is actually taught, and that's for various reasons: staff availability, staff on leave, or staff being ill, which has certainly happened this year, for instance. But it's also because we have 2 new members of staff joining us this year, and so they will be participating in the course, and we don't quite know what they're going to be offering yet. It is, however, a good idea for you to all look down, if you haven't done so already, at list of staff, not only because it gives you a sense of who we are and what we work on and what our own research interests are, but also, it gives you a sense of our range of expertise. So we have people who work in medieval art and the Renaissance, the 18th century, like me, the 19th century, right up until the present day, but also in a range of geographical contexts as well. So we're for an art history department, we're actually quite big, and that means we cover an awful lot of ground. And it's worth knowing that, what we do, particularly when you're thinking about dissertation topics and what we work on. I think that's about it that I want to cover in terms of the content of the course. Is there anything I've missed, Caitlin?
I don't think so. But I was just going to say that I agree that it's that's why I chose art history, because I did my undergrad here in art history as well. But it's like what you were saying, the modules can be quite broad, so it's quite good for being able to there was courses that I took that I wasn't sure I would actually be interested in, and I ended up learning so much and really, really liking that particular area of art history. And I did independent study as well, which was quite good, especially because I'm not doing my dissertation this year, so it meant I could explore my sort of specific area of art history, which is 18th century stuff. But so it's quite good and it's quite broad.
I didn't know that, Caitlin. I thought you were an earlier Renaissance person.
I was. My undergraduate dissertation was Renaissance, but I've switched now to 18th century.
I couldn't be more delighted to learn that you were switched to a allegiance to the 18th century.
Yeah,
it's made my day. I'm delighted. I suppose one of the things I've just thought of, something I should have said, is that there is, therefore, what I was trying to say, and very ineptly, was that there's actually quite a flexibility in the program in terms of your choice, and in that you can take a broad range of topics across different periods, but you can also elect to take a more specialist route as well. And I also should have said, and didn't, that some of our modules are open to rather modules in other subjects, in other programs are open to you. Christine might speak to that in a moment, but also elsewhere in the School of Cultural and Creative Arts, of which History of Art is a part, and also elsewhere in college. So I think we're very keen, on promoting interdisciplinarity. So we're happy to support those kinds of you taking classes out with the department. So, Christine, you might speak maybe about.
Certainly for the MLitt's, also in art history, there's electives that allow them to take a course that's a technical art history course. One of those is testimonies in artist practice. And we've had students this year from the MLitt on that course in the first semester, and then the authentic artwork, which is really popular with the MLitt's as well, where we had our wonderful curator for discomfort is their first lecture, and that really opens the world up to all sorts of issues. And I think they really enjoyed that option to be able to do that, and kind of an insight into the difference probably between technical art history and art history, and then they can see that's something they're interested in or not, or just because it broadens their aspect and what they're interested in the future. So that's something we offer. And then also when it comes to choosing dissertation projects, it's potentially there that you do something that is more technical art history based than art history. I mean, it's a subtle difference. You know, we're not going into a different field. We're just doing it with a different emphasis in the project, so that's available as well from that point of view. And we also have what I quite like. Also, sometimes we have students from completely different disciplines, like from classics, not that different discipline, but a different discipline, and that brings in either, you know, when you have discussions, when you have seminars, having those mix of students really nice. For everybody, brings a different perspective. So I think, as John says, that flexibility, and you know, if you say I'm really keen on this, we'll do our best to make it happen. I think, you know, as far as is possible within the system, you know, and I think that certainly goes when it comes to dissertations. There's someone who's fascinated about everything in this university. You won't find a subject that isn't covered. So if you suddenly want to know the secret, you know, history of beavers and related to art history, there's probably someone who'd be your second supervisor. I don't know, but it's very much what I like about Glasgow generally, is that because it's such a big university, there's this breadth. So that kind of filters down into then the teaching for all the individual programs that we can call upon. So I think that's true across the programs.
Absolutely. I was talking about that actually with one of our new members of staff, our incoming professor, only this morning, actually, about she's coming from a smaller university, and suddenly all these kind of possibilities open up. There is expertise in these areas, you know, which aren't necessarily always available in universities. Glasgow is a big, old institution in that way, isn't it? I noticed in the chat that there was a question actually about whether students would necessarily have had to have done art history, and I kind of alluded to that in my brief kind of synopsis of the course, that, you know, not necessarily. In fact, lots of, you know, it can be very valuable to come from other disciplines. And I presume in the case of technical art history, for instance, Christina, that it's not necessarily something that people have had any kind of background in.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, traditionally, you may have done art history as an undergraduate, but that's not. We've broadened that aspect up. We've had people from fine art practice joining the program, people from classics, from chemistry, from viniculture. 1 year, we had a student who'd done an undergraduate degree in winemaking. But again, it's a way of thinking. So it's more the approach to thinking and research that's key than the content, and then we can bring you the content and help you interpret that and develop skills to do that. So we're open. If it's a subject that's kind of quite far from art history, then it's usually done on a case-by-case basis, where I would look at the application and see that we felt that it was going to work for the student to do that.
I like the idea of a student from with a winemaking background, Christina.
Who's good at the chemistry and good at the history, actually.
Yeah. I noticed there's a question specifically for Caitlin in the chat as well, about asking you about the switch from undergraduate to postgraduate, and whether that was a difficult move, or what maybe you've noticed as different.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously, I didn't do a very big jump because I did art history at undergrad at this university, but I took a 2-year break and worked for 2 years, not anything to do with art history. So I was kind of out of things for a couple of years. And obviously I'm doing it part-time as well, so the workload's not as much as it would be full-time. But for me, I've found it's more work in terms of there's for your classes and stuff, there's, you know, maybe more readings that you have to do every week. The essays are longer, but it did feel like it felt like quite a natural progression for me. Like, I think from 4th year, it just feels like you've gone to another level. And I think, you know, when you've done your undergrad studies, you're more prepared than you think you are to do a master's. and also the department is just like really supportive, and that makes such a big difference as well. And you know, you can always ask questions and everything like that. So yeah, it's definitely more challenging, but it's yeah, and it's nothing. I've not found it to be a really difficult difference or anything, and it's been quite a natural sort of next step.
It is intensive though, isn't it? Studying for a master's is intensive.
Yeah, especially from what I've heard from course mates are full time. Yeah,
it's a lot to condense into.
It's a good challenge though.
Yeah, absolutely. That's you're learning all the time, which
exactly.
Isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to give a shout out to the book and paper students who joined. Look forward to seeing you in in September. Obviously, if you've got any questions for me, please put it in the chat. And to a couple of technical history people who are thinking about taking the program, if you've got anything specific you'd like to ask me, if you put it in the chat, I'll try to address that. So I probably should talk a little bit about the MPhil, because I haven't actually mentioned the book and paper program. So the MPhil is 2 years full time. Again, the prerequisite is in a first degree. For those who may be thinking about applying next year, there's actually an interview process which is different from many of the other programs. That's partly because it's very vocational. It's a 2-year really intensive program, and we'd like to be sure that you really know what you're letting yourself in for in the best possible way, and that you kind of understand the kind of physicality of it, in the sense you may be bookbinding, you may be repairing paper, so there's a kind of studio-based practice as well as the academic practice. So that interview process is giving us a chance to talk that through with you, and you'd have to produce a small portfolio for that. But you'll see that all on the web pages for the program. So as I said, there's this book and paper. It's actually book and archival materials conservation and paper conservation. And I know everyone who's coming has already taken their electives. The first semester, there's core elements to that program. So you'll be learning about the context of book and paper, the history of printmaking, for instance. And you'll all be going to the Glasgow Print Studio for a workshop where you'll be working with a master printer, so that you really understand how a print's made, how to look at a print, why certain features of print exist. And it just gets your eye in really, really well. And we did that last year for our technical art history students, which really actually improved their ability to look at prints just by knowing how to make them. And it ended up in one of them going to work at National Gallery on Alan Ramsey's blue paper work. So sometimes for the book and paper people, you may be with the technical art history students as well, because they're kind of for us seen as very core skills. So you'll be having lectures. There'll be 3 core courses through that first semester, some of which are more theoretically based to give you context of the subject, and some which are practically based in the studio. And for book and paper concentration students, they're in the studio 2.5 days a week. And some of that time is shared with technical art history, 1 time a week, and some of that is solely just book and paper. So at the beginning, you're really all together. And as the kind of year goes on, you separate out into book and archival materials and paper conservation. And we'll be going up to, I guess, to the placement point that is different from the way it works for the MLitt, in that you have your placement all in one go in the summer of the first year. And it's really exciting that lots of institutions have offered us placements for the book and paper students already, in Scotland, in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, and down in London, and in the Bodleian. So there's quite a lot of choice for placements, and that's guaranteed both for technical art history and guaranteed for book and paper, those placement places. And then you'll go out into your second year, and there'll be more core courses, and really the core, you start to develop much more independent work, but with lectures working alongside you, and lots of studio time with supervised studio time in learning kind of more, developing more skills for the discipline you've chosen between the book or the paper discipline. And that goes on until the summer, and then you have your dissertation, research project dissertation. And I think what's slightly changed from maybe those of you maybe looked at the textile conservation program is that it can be treatment-based research, which is rather than just say, academic, non-treatment based research. So it's a treatment where you do research into the treatment as well as do the treatment. That gives people opportunity to develop kind of state-of-the-art treatments in conservation and be part of that active community. But you may prefer something very academic as your dissertation project, where you're, not that doing treatment is academic, but I mean kind of not hands-on, where you're looking at a particular element of that. It could be designing new enzymes for paper cleaning. It could be looking at the history of paper, as a research project, how the kind of practice of making papers changed and how that's affected artists, and then how that's conservation of it. So there's all sorts of potential. And I think, again, as we've talked about already in Bands of Choice, is that if people show a certain thing they really want to pursue, then we'll do our best to make that happen through the dissertations as well. But also we'll do things that challenge you. So if you come in, knowing one thing really well, we'll probably say to you, well, why don't you try something a bit different, a bit that's going to take you, somewhere else to broaden that, your experience and your skill set. So we'll kind of guide you at the same time as really getting into what you're interested in for the future.
I think you've kind of sorry, Christine. Sorry.
Yeah, go on, say.
No, I was going to say you've kind of answered this, but I noticed in the comments that there's a question from Alice, which is asking about how much of the book and paper course is practical compared to theoretical. And it sounds from what you were saying as if it's like it depends on the direction you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's training you to be a practical conservator, and that's why we have an interview. It is a vocational course, but at the same time, it's research-led. So if someone wanted to go into kind of a research area, you'll have that skill base to go to do a PhD in conservation or related to conservation of book and paper. So or into a kind of towards collections management maybe, or towards some kind of archives. So, but the key is that we at the end of 2 years, you'll need more practice, because conservation, you never stop learning, and the experience in conservation is about lots of treatments, but you'll have the core skills. And as we've been working very much with the profession at the moment to say, what is it you want from a book conservator in the 21st century, or what are the real needs in paper conservation? What are the skills that our students need to have to be for their placement, for their dissertation, beyond that into the profession? So many of those skills are transferable in terms of research skills, in a sense. So someone who wanted to go down in the end a more theoretical route than a practical route, that would be possible. But I'd say it ultimately it's a practice-based program. And I think the technical history is because you're not doing conservation, but you are making replicas, you are doing analysis and technical analysis, and you are handling objects. And at the moment, I have two students who have left them my own devices in Perth Art Museum, taking technical images of 3 works, one by Millet, another one by a Dutch artist called Pinnaker. And after, at this point in the year, they're competent to work independently. I left them yesterday, got them going. So that's the level they're at by the time they get to this point in the year. And to quite a high degree self-directed, but there is always that support to when they need either technical help or kind of academic support for their work.
There's a good question.
Read the question. I need to read the question.
Yeah. So there's a good question here for Caitlin about being in Glasgow and what Glasgow is like as a city. Which, for young people, Caitlin, that's the question.
Oh, I did see that one. I saw the one.
But also about what it's like as a city, in terms of its cultural life and galleries and museums, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that Glasgow is one of the best cities in the world, which I always tell people whenever I go abroad, because it's just, as a young person, it's really, really lively. Everyone is really friendly. I think it's really easy to meet people here, and there's always lots to do. In terms of art related things, and we've in Glasgow we've so many galleries. We've got on campus, we have the Hunterian Art Gallery, and then 5-10 minute walk from the university we've got Kelvin Grove, which has a lot of great paintings, and then there's the Burrell collection, which is a short train journey away, which is in a nice park where there's Highland cows as well, so you can see them. And we went to an exhibition at the Burrell collection as part of one of the courses that I did with a lot of Degas paintings, which was really good. And the good thing about the UK is all of the galleries and museums are free general admission for everyone. And then if it's an exhibition that's on, there's usually like almost always a discounted student ticket. So it's never too expensive. And then Edinburgh's also a short, like less than an hour on the train. Then you've got the National Gallery of Scotland there, which has a lot of great paintings, and they get paintings on loan from the National Gallery in London sometimes as well. So that's always good to go to. And there's the Portrait Gallery as well. So yeah, there's a lot to do, and there's always really interesting exhibitions on, and yeah, and there's lots of just a lot to do here. And we've got lovely parks as well, and nice art, which is one of my favorite things about Glasgow. And especially the West End where the university is, like all the buildings are so beautiful. So yeah,
Yes.
it's very big.
It's a beautiful city, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a beautiful city.
Especially when the sun's out.
It is, yes, it is sunny at the moment, isn't it? I can't for students coming to Glasgow, though, I can't promise that the weather will always be that way. There's another question from there's another question for you, Christina, from Alice about
I can see that,
what people might expect after graduating from the book and paper course in terms of a career. And
so a little bit of history here. Yeah, because there was a program in the UK called Camberwell Book and Paper Conservation. It was an MA. Many of the people who are now in the profession, who came from the UK and abroad, were trained there. That program closed down 5 years ago, and we were approached to take on that by the profession because there's actually a shortage of book conservators. In fact, there's 3 adverts at the moment in Scotland alone for book conservators. And it was felt there's a need for new generations to be trained, and obviously Glasgow having the fantastic collections within our own university, and as it was really explained in Scotland as a whole, it's in the natural home, and we already have the textile conservation program. And paper, one thing you may have noticed if you looked at our website, one of the things we're going to specialise is in photography conservation, because again, that's where it will hire certain skills that we hope to train the students with that will give them opportunities. And again, it's because within the profession there's a dearth of professionals coming up with these skills, and that's not just in the UK, that's kind of worldwide actually. So I think in terms of careers, certainly there'll be potential for good careers in book and paper conservation. Having said that, it's a small field, and once you graduate you still need to practice. So internships usually in most conservation programs, and we hope in paid internships, that you'll go in internships, and they're advertised worldwide, back in the States, but also in the UK and in European cities. So you need that period just to have the practice, because every object you look at, every object you have to treat will throw back surprises at you, which is what makes it a fantastically interesting topic. So you won't immediately necessarily be taken on as a full-time post, but that process of becoming a professional conservator would have certainly started through the program. And you'll be taught by professionals within the university, but also from out with the university who are in the profession, to give you that experience of working at the highest level and for the highest level. So by doing your placements with institutions that have book conservation programs and book conservation departments, at National Libraries of Scotland, for instance, or the Royal College of Arms as another place that have offered us placements to work on their collections, and the Scottish Yachting Archive. So quite a variation and potential, but that gives you that introduction to the profession at the same time as learning skills. Hope that's answered the question.
I mean, as someone with a particular interest in watercolor and in print as well, I'm well aware of the lack of paper conservators there are around. As you said, there's a real serious problem, I think, not only, as you say, not only in British museums and galleries. That's also a good question, Caitlin, about what career you might want to follow. Where do you see art history as a subject taking you?
Yeah, I think, well, once I finish my master's, like my eventual goal is to hopefully do a PhD in art history, maybe a bit further down the line. I think I probably want to work in the industry for a little bit in a gallery. But it's very, I think with art history, there's a lot of different options. You know, you can do academia, you know, if you do further study, um, or in the same way you can, there's lots of jobs in galleries as well. It's also, I mean, it's quite transferable as well, I think, just for general jobs in like arts and culture, you know, events organizing, things like that. Yeah, it can be quite broad. I mean, everyone I know on the course,
I
everyone
don't
has
know
very,
if you, sorry.
no. What were you going to say?
There was a wonderful, we had a wonderful careers event, actually. I don't know if you were able to go, Caitlin, earlier this year, where we were joined actually by lots of alumni who were doing amazing things actually in various kind of arts related sectors, not only working as curators, but also in kind of management roles as well in arts and heritage. So really wonderful and inspiring to see. I noticed there's a question from Alice, and maybe also there's two Alices, which is confusing me slightly, about the dissertation and also about the length of period of study, which is worth pointing out actually, because I'm aware that if you're coming from different, maybe overseas, say from the States, that actually the masters here does look different from the ways in which it's studied abroad. So it is the MLitt is a 12-month course, although, as Caitlin exemplifies, it can also be a kind of part-time 2-year course as well. Now, if you take it as a 1-year course, then yes, you will be writing your dissertation in that year. And the dissertation, some people come with strong ideas as to what they want to be working on. Sometimes, however, it might shift about, as Caitlin has found, perhaps. Suddenly find herself wanting to work on the 18th century, which I'm delighted about. So it's a good idea. I always recommend it to be thinking about what you might want to, where your particular areas of interest lie, to be ahead of arriving to do the course, but at the same time, you don't need to be doing that. That's something you can be thinking about as you arrive here and talk to us, really, and something that might emerge over time. It's something which people are beginning to work on now. We ask for students to submit kind of preliminary ideas about what they might be wanting to do shortly at the beginning of the second semester. So that's in the new year, in January or so. And then we ask them to submit a kind of more formal proposal for what they might want to be working on for their dissertation in around towards the end of March, April time. And then really from there, after that point, when all the kind of taught programs have ended, you are essentially engaged in your work on your dissertation in consultation with an appointed supervisor. Hence, as Christina suggested earlier, that's why Caitlin is the only person here, because everyone else is away doing research, working on their dissertation, which will be submitted in August. I'm trying to look quickly at other questions.
There's a question from Gabriella about art history, about the interaction with alumni.
Yeah. That's a good question. Well, there are alumni of the course, because around in the department, in the subject areas still rather, because they're now doing master's courses, or rather PhDs rather, I mean, with us. So I indeed have a PhD student who came through the MLitt course. In fact, I've got two who did the MLitt. I forget, the one did the MLitt several years ago and has now come back to do her PhD with me. So it's a route into a PhD, maybe at Glasgow, but also a route into PhDs elsewhere as well. And also, of course, we have members, alumni working in the institutions around us. So some of our work placements are with people who've, graduated through the program as well. Sherry asks, are there any suggestions you might have for more mature students looking to apply to the MLitt in art history? I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I came to art history quite late myself, though, Sherry, if that helps. I didn't do my first degree until I was 25, so I was certainly later coming to my postgraduate studies. I had a working career before I came to art history, and Caitlin was telling us she had a couple of years out and worked before she came back. So, Sherry, sorry, I should have read down. Are you looking for anything in their application that would make up for the time gap, subject gap? I think, given that you have a background in practical art to begin with, Sherry, looking at your messages, then that would certainly serve you well, and would obviously be something we would look out for. Like Christina and the MLitt in technical art history, we certainly have a number of people from a practical background taking art history as well, and I welcome that because it brings a very different perspective on into the topic, I think.
Yeah, I think I really like having that mixture, and each student learns from each other because they just have a different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
So I think it's really good.
Absolutely, and I always think my attitude to teaching is I'm learning as well. You learn things from students, and learning things from those, from people who come from different perspectives, different backgrounds, is enormously beneficial, really. No,
yeah,
it shouldn't be a concern at all.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It shouldn't be a concern. And we've got also PhD students and mature students. I have one who I'm convening for their PhD, not the actual supervisor, but it's great. Again, you come with it with some other things, life skills as well, that are all transferable and all help you as part of that process of learning.
Absolutely.
So I think it's not an issue.
Yeah. The PhD student I just mentioned, who's come back to me after several years, in the interim, she went away and had a family and started a small business and things, but wanted to come back to art history, and and actually she brings an interesting perspective, I think, out of that to her particular subject, actually. So absolutely not a concern. Not for us, I don't think, Sherry.
So I think thinking about any tips for students starting in September, or anyone thinking about applying. So I think for those maybe starting in September, for the kind of the.
And also there's a question for Caitlin.
All right, okay.
About
your
dissertation.
Let's do that first.
What's your dissertation?
Well, because I'm doing my independent study just now, that's been quite helpful because you can explore different ideas. And also I kind of explored similar ideas to it in my essays for the core course, the research methods course, because that's quite broad. You can choose what topic you want to do, but it's about like the research methods of it. So my idea is to do with, I'm very focused on French art. So I think I'm going to look at 18th century French art in some context, and also because I've studied a lot of Impressionism this year, which is obviously later century, 19th century, but maybe some sort of comparison between the 2 centuries. But yeah, it's still early days.
Well, it makes sense. There's a huge Rococo revival at the end, as you know, through people like the Goncourt brothers.
And no one wants to study Rococo art. Yeah.
Sorry, you disappeared then, Caitlin. Sorry.
Oh, did I? I was just saying Rococo.
Yes.
I think
So in fact, that would work. Yeah. It's I think that's a subject which was previously often kind of dismissed in a way as something belonging to something purely decorative, but there's been an awful lot of really exciting work done on it in recent years.
Yeah,
as you know from your own work. Yeah, no, I could envisage something along those lines working really well. What was that other question again, Christina?
Any tips for students starting?
Oh, any highlights of the year as well for you, Caitlin? Sorry, any highlights of the year for you, Caitlin?
Yeah, I mean, a big highlight has just been going back to uni and being a student again, because I just really like it. I just really like studying. But in general, had quite a few good sort of class trips. Like we went, as I was saying, we went to the Burrell collection, see the Degas exhibition, and then we went to the National Gallery in Edinburgh as well. Which obviously you can go and do that on your own time anytime, but it's quite good to do it, as a group, and then you can hear your classmates' perspectives on art and things like that. Yes, that was quite good. And then there's also, I've went to a few, there's always talks that run from you. It's usually like, I think, lecturers from other universities and stuff kind of in the evening, and they do talks,
Yes.
which you can just go to. And that's been really interesting as well, because you get a lot of different perspectives, that, because it's staff from other universities and stuff. So that's been really interesting to do as well.
That is a good point. Yes, there's a research program where we, as Caitlin says, invited speakers come and talk about some aspect of their current research, and that's an important aspect in a way of being a postgraduate student. I think you are part of that community of scholars. You're entering that kind of conversation, as it were, with them, and so it's a really important aspect, I think, of being a master's student, is enjoying, participating in that kind of research culture of the subject. Yeah, I think our questions seem to have run out. So one last thing for you again, Caitlin, we're putting all the pressure on you. What tips would you have for a student coming to start the masters in and not just the art history masters, but any of coming to Glasgow in September, start to think about it as postgraduate study and being in Glasgow as well?
Yeah, I think in terms of the studying aspect of it, I would say just try and get ahead as much as you can, because the work comes on very quickly. So if you have access to reading lists and things like that before the classes have actually started, try and not anything too intense, but obviously try and give yourself an idea of what you're going to be asked and what you're looking for. Another big tip that I always say to people is make use of office hours. Like if you have any questions when you've got essays or anything like that, just ask if you can have a chat with whoever takes that course, because that is so helpful. In terms of just coming to Glasgow, I would say, like, for student life, just try and do as much as you can in terms of, having a look at if there's any societies that you're interested in, any sort of opportunities that come up, to meet people, especially, if you're moving here from somewhere else, because everyone, as I said, is really friendly, and just take all of the opportunities that, not all of them, but as many as you can, and then yeah, and there's lots of staff here to help, you know, if you have questions and things like that. It's a very supportive university, and a very lovely city. Yeah.
Well, picking up actually on something Caitlin has just said, that certainly I'll be writing to everyone, offer holders, for wanting to join this coming September. I'll be writing to everyone, confirming the courses choices that are available, and also possible reading lists attached to them. But if you do also, if anyone has any questions that, you know, that occurs to them after this, after we, you know, sign off here, or any questions about the program and the study, just, you can find my email on the subject website, and please just contact me. I'm happy to try and answer as best I can.
Yeah, and that goes to me too, if either the technical art history or the book and paper conservation program. And we will be sending out reading lists slightly later in the year for those people who are coming for September. Not too long, so you get a break, but enough to kind of give you a really good sense and kind of prepare you for the first semester. And I would agree, Glasgow's are super friendly. I'm a Londoner, and Glasgow is the friendliest city that I know in the UK, actually. I really love living here, and there's potential for doing so many great things in the city, whether you're a student or whether you're staff, actually. Yeah.
And also outside, you're in, you know, so close to some fabulous scenery and landscapes. You know, you need to make the most of your time in Glasgow. Is the other thing I would perhaps say. Okay. I think we might.
I think we can say our goodbyes and stay online. So looking forward to seeing any of you still out there. We can't see you, but we're looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah.
Number 8 University
can say our
Gardens.
goodbyes.
Yeah, bye.